What if the cheese in your fridge, something as ordinary as a grilled cheese sandwich, wasn't food at all but a loaded weapon hiding in plain sight? Across 9 states, recalls have exposed 8 brands tainted by contamination, plastic fragments, and chemicals that regulators in Europe already reject. The very slices meant to comfort families are now being pulled from shelves under the highest level of FDA warnings. How many more bites before one mistake turns into a hospital stay, a medical bill, or worse? A tragedy that could have been avoided? Statistics don't lie. Foodborne illness sends nearly 48 million Americans to the doctor every year, with seniors bearing the heaviest burden. And yet corporate giants keep pushing their cheese products, masking shortcuts with slogans and smiling cows. Is this nourishment or is it betrayal wrapped in cellophane? This is the Downturn Report, where the truth gets personal. Today we uncover the shocking truth behind 8 cheese brands now under recall across 9 states. But don't panic yet, because at the end of every part, you'll also learn which safer alternatives can protect your table, your health, and your family's trust. Number 1. Wegmans. 8 cheese brands that 9 states must recall and destroy at all costs. This is not a rumor from some distant corner of the internet. It is a fresh headline stamped by regulators and echoed across kitchen tables. In August 2025, Wegmans Food Markets, a chain that built its reputation on being the warm, trustworthy family grocer, was slammed with a Class Y recall, the FDA's deadliest category, for its medium camembert soft ripened cheese. Listeria was the culprit, a pathogen that does not ask politely before it enters your bloodstream. Shelves in Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. suddenly became danger zones. Even though no deaths or hospitalizations were reported yet, officials warned that for seniors, pregnant women, and the immunocompromised, one slice could mean meningitis, miscarriage, or worse. A quiet funeral that no one planned for. This scandal was more than a recall. It was a crack in Wegman's carefully painted portrait. For years, the chain wrapped itself in words like local, artisanal, and clean, as if those labels were bulletproof shields. But watchdogs peeled back the wrapping and found additives and preservatives already blacklisted in Europe. Paying extra for Wegman's pure cheddar turned out to be no different than buying discount processed slices from a bargain bin. Imagine saving up coins for a steak dinner only to be served canned beef. Betrayal always tastes sourer than spoiled milk. Yet behind the shiny packaging lies an even uglier secret. Reports tied Wegman's cheese supply chain to dairy barns where immigrant workers labored 12 hours a day, gloves torn, ammonia burning their lungs, their wages too thin to buy the very milk they bottled. For older Americans who still remember decades on assembly lines, this revelation struck deep. It felt like their own history of sweat and sacrifice being replayed on loop, only this time with cows and camembert. Wegmans wasn't selling just cheese, it was selling exploitation camouflaged as tradition. And then came the rivers. Environmental groups revealed that some suppliers were dumping manure runoff into New York waterways, transforming once clear trout streams into brown sludge. Families who had fished those rivers for generations now watched belly-up carcasses float past their porches. Buying Wegmans cheese suddenly felt like buying a ticket to the funeral of one's own childhood memories. Inspectors piled on with findings that Wegmans regional warehouses flirted with unsafe temperatures, basically turning cheese crates into bacteria incubators. Corporate spokespeople muttered polished apologies, but that is like a mechanic telling you the brakes should hold only after you're already speeding downhill. For consumers who trusted Wegmans, it was too little, too late. The emotional fallout was raw. Local papers published letters from seniors terrified after feeding Wegmans cheese to vulnerable spouses. A widow from Rochester wrote of her panic after seeing the recall alert on television. She could not sleep, wondering if the meal she served might turn into her husband's last. Those 2 words, what if, carried more weight than any cheddar block could. What Wegmans forgot is that trust is not built on glossy commercials or loyalty cards. It is built on protection. Once stripped away, the illusion revealed tainted cheese, polluted rivers, overworked laborers, and frightened customers holding medical bills instead of grocery receipts. And here's the bitter twist. Shoppers do not have to accept this. Safer alternatives exist right down the dairy aisle. Brands like Cabot, Tillamook, Organic Valley, and even smaller regional dairies still committed to rigorous testing and ethical practices offer options that do not gamble with your health. Choosing them is not just shopping, it is a quiet protest, a way of saying you refuse to bankroll greed disguised as family values. So when the headlines scream about recalls, they are not simply about cheese. They're about who we trust to put food on our tables and what it costs us when that trust is sold off for profit. For retirees, low-income workers, and families living on the edge, Wegman's recall is not just a corporate scandal. It is a warning carved into the grocery cart. Even the brands wrapped in nostalgia can turn rotten when greed takes the wheel. Number 2. Happy Farms. Aldi's Happy Farms found itself in the headlines in March 2025, when a Class 2 recall yanked roughly 400 cases of its Colby Jack shredded cheese off shelves. The reason? Stainless steel. Fragments potentially mixed into the bags. A detail that sounds like a bad joke but could have meant real injuries for unsuspecting shoppers. Aldi rushed to offer refunds, promising stronger inspections and upgraded metal detectors, yet the damage was already done. Across kitchen tables and online forums, the uneasy question spread. If a cheese labeled Happy hides steel shards, what else might be slipping past unnoticed? The name Happy Farms paints a picture worthy of a postcard. Sunlit fields, cheerful cows, smiling farmers. But beneath that cheerful wrapping lies a far darker story. Past recalls have tied this label to bacterial contamination, including listeria threats and shredded and sliced products. These weren't minor hiccups. They were potential life-threatening dangers. For families scraping to make every grocery dollar count, the idea that a discount pack of cheese could land someone in the emergency room feels like betrayal with interest. It's the cruelest kind of irony, saving 50 cents today, then paying thousands in hospital bills tomorrow. Watchdogs peeled away the marketing gloss and exposed another contradiction. Packages tout natural or simple, but inside are emulsifiers, stabilizers, and milk from industrial farms where antibiotics are routine. Europe has already slammed the door on many of these additives, while American shoppers are quietly spoon-fed what other nations reject. That cheery Happy Farms logo begins to look less like a guarantee and more like a stand-up routine where the audience is the punchline. Digging deeper, the supply chain reads like a modern-day Dickens novel. Investigators trace the brand back to mega dairies where animal suffering is standard. Cows limping in cramped stalls, calves pulled away within hours of birth, and manure piled high enough to poison surrounding land. Workers describe grueling 12-hour shifts in freezing facilities, hands cracked, paychecks barely covering groceries. For anyone who once clocked in at a factory floor, the echoes are haunting. The grind is the same, only this time it's repackaged into shredded cheese. Then comes the environmental bill. Advocacy groups have sounded alarms about fertilizer and manure runoff tied to suppliers feeding Aldi's cheese machine. Small rivers across the Midwest, once watering holes for kids and fishing spots for Sunday afternoons, now run foul. Dead fish bob to the surface like grim reminders that every discount has a hidden cost. Saving $1 at checkout is meaningless if your town later pays millions cleaning up poisoned water. And the scandals don't stop there. Aldi has faced lawsuits over allegedly misleading sustainability claims tied to its private labels, Happy Farms included. Shoppers learned that behind green logos and polished promises, they were sold a mirage. For older Americans, weary of corporations cashing in on trust, the sting feels familiar. Another giant company, whispering sweet nothings while cutting corners behind closed doors. The betrayal becomes personal in everyday stories. A grandmother in Pennsylvania grabbed a pack of Happy Farms Singles for her grandkids' grilled cheese lunches. Days later, she saw the recall notice flash on the television. Panic flooded in. Had the children already eaten it? She tossed the package, but the unease lingered. It wasn't about losing $3. It was about losing confidence in something as simple as a sandwich. In the end, Happy Farms shows how cheap can turn costly in ways no one bargains for. Metal shards, bacterial threats, chemical shortcuts, broken promises, polluted rivers, exploited workers. Aldi's brand may wave a banner of affordability, but affordability means little when safety is the currency being traded away, and shoppers aren't without alternatives. Regional brands like Boar's Head, Finlandia, or even Vermont Creamery may cost more upfront, but they bring peace of mind that no recall notice can buy back. The truth is, Happy Farms isn't happy at all. It's a cautionary tale written in fine print and stainless steel fragments. Number 3. Kraft Singles. Kraft Singles. Those glossy orange squares that have become as American as baseball and backyard barbecues were once a staple of comfort and nostalgia. But in September 2023, that familiar wrapper carried a very different message. Danger. A recall hit more than 83,000 cases after a wrapping machine malfunction left thin strips of plastic clinging to the slices. 6 consumers reported gagging or choking. No deaths, but the image was enough. Something marketed as a safe family food suddenly looked like a trap laid in your own kitchen. For anyone with dentures, throat issues, or fragile health, that sliver of plastic was not just annoying, it was potentially deadly. The recall might have been the latest spark, but the fire had been smoldering for years. Kraft Singles has long been the poster child for processed food, masquerading as something wholesome. Cheese product is the legal label, but what sits inside that package is a cocktail of milk proteins, emulsifiers, and artificial dyes. Yellow 5 and Yellow 6. Chemicals that Europe either restricts or bans outright. Still find their way into American lunchboxes via Kraft. It's a slap in the face for shoppers who assumed they were buying a simple dairy product. Imagine learning that the all-American cheese on your grandchild's sandwich wouldn't even be legal in parts of Europe. That realization sours the melt before it ever hits the bread. Nutritionists have warned for decades. One Kraft Single hides more than 250 milligrams of sodium. For seniors battling high blood pressure, that's like laying down a salt lick between 2 slices of bread. Lawsuits accused Kraft of misleading advertising, stretching claims about calcium, and once boasting that each slice contained 5 ounces of milk. The Federal Trade Commission called foul, forcing the company to scrap that claim. Later, when the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics slapped the Kids Eat Right logo on Kraft Singles, more than 5,000 dietitians signed a petition demanding its removal. The outcry was simple. Don't dress up processed salt slabs as a health food for children. The rot doesn't stop at labels. Reports about Kraft suppliers revealed dairy megafarms where cows live in cramped stalls, pumped with growth hormones, their lives measured in gallons until they collapse. Workers describe long shifts with chemical exposure and little pay. To Americans who once labored in factories, the echoes are painful. A cycle of exploitation carried forward, only this time hidden behind a smiling slice of cheese. Environmental stains smear the picture further. Runoff from industrial farms tied to Kraft has been linked to river pollution, algae blooms, and fish die-offs. Generations who grew up swimming in clean lakes and catching Sunday fish now watch as waterways choke on corporate waste. Each slice of Kraft Singles becomes a bitter reminder of rivers lost to greed. Even Kraft's lobbying has left a sour aftertaste. The company poured money into campaigns to stall clearer food labeling in the US, while European shoppers enjoyed stricter transparency. For older Americans who grew up believing labels should mean something, it felt like a betrayal of both health and democracy. The emotional blow is the hardest. Kraft Singles were once comfort incarnate. Gooey grilled cheese on rainy afternoons, melted slices at July cookouts. To learn that this icon carried choking hazards, chemical dyes, and corporate spin is like discovering that the bedtime story you loved as a child hid a poisoned apple in every chapter. Nostalgia curdles into suspicion, and trust evaporates faster than steam off a frying pan. Kraft built an empire on convenience, but today the empire looks cracked. A slice that once symbolized Americana now symbolizes something else entirely. How corporations can choke both literally and figuratively the very families they claim to feed, and shoppers are not powerless. Brands like Horizon Organic, Applegate, and Point Reyes Farmstead offer safer alternatives without the hidden dangers Kraft has been dragging along for decades. The choice is clear. Keep rolling the dice with plastic-wrapped shortcuts, or turn the page to real cheese that doesn't gamble with your health. Number 4. Velveeta. Velveeta has been marketed for generations as liquid gold, the block that melts smoothly into dips, casseroles, and party trays. But peel back the shiny foil, and what glitters isn't gold at all. Velveeta's past is littered with recalls, lawsuits, and marketing tricks that reveal less of a family staple and more of a corporate hustle. The shine fades quickly once you realize that a product Americans once relied on for comfort food instead delivered a steady diet of broken promises and hidden risks. The recall history alone tells its own ugly story. Kraft Heinz, the parent company, has yanked Velveeta off shelves more than once. First when preservative levels fell too low, raising fears of spoilage and foodborne illness across a dozen Midwestern states, and later when wire bristle fragments were discovered in microwavable cups. Imagine heating up a quick mac and cheese only to find it studded with metal. A nightmare scenario for anyone hoping for a safe dinner. And let's not forget the allergen labeling blunders. Products shipped with faulty ingredient disclosures, a mistake so basic it borders on negligence. Parents and grandparents alike wondered how a multi-billion-dollar company could fumble something as elementary as printing a label. What sits inside the package may be even worse. Velveeta isn't legally cheese. Since the early 2000s, it's been forced to wear the title Pasteurized Prepared Cheese Product. The block is a lab-born hybrid. Whey protein, emulsifiers, preservatives, artificial dyes like yellow 5 and yellow 6, and enough sodium to make doctors wince. A single serving can load the body with nearly 400 milligrams of salt, turning a family-sized casserole into a hypertension time bomb. Retirees already balancing prescriptions for blood pressure and heart disease find themselves betrayed, fooled into thinking they were buying a simple dairy product, when in reality, it's a salt slab engineered for profit. Consumer trust has been further shredded by lawsuits. In New York, Velveeta shells and cheese faced a class action accusing Kraft Heinz of false advertising, after it was found the product was made with real cheese only in slogan, not in substance. Whey and canola oil carried the sauce, not cheese. Another lawsuit accused the brand of deceiving shoppers with microwave instructions, promising meals in 3.5 minutes that often took longer. At first glance, it sounds petty, but it's a window into a culture of dishonesty, where bending the truth is baked into the recipe. If they'll fudge on minutes, what else are they hiding? And the shadows extend well beyond the supermarket aisle. Investigations into Kraft Heinz's dairy suppliers show grim conditions. Cows overworked and injected with hormones, calves separated at birth, barns packed tight. Workers, often migrants, slog through freezing plants with caustic cleaning chemicals and quotas that grind bodies down. For older Americans who once worked long shifts in mills or factories, it's a chilling déjà vu. Corporate profit wrung from flesh, whether human or animal. The environmental costs drip through every layer of Velveeta's supply chain. Runoff from industrial dairy farms tied to Kraft Heinz has been linked to water pollution across the Midwest, fueling algae blooms and killing fish. Towns downstream foot the cleanup bill while Kraft continues selling its liquid gold. For communities that once gathered by clean rivers, every gooey football dip now tastes like betrayal. A party snack laced with memories of poisoned water, Velveeta has become less of a comfort food and more of a case study in corporate cynicism. It represents how convenience is dangled in front of consumers while corners are cut behind closed doors. From recalls and lawsuits to environmental stains and nutritional landmines, the golden block is really a gilded warning. For anyone seeking real, safer alternatives, options like Tillamook, Bel Gioioso, or regional creameries such as Cabot or Roth offer cheeses that don't come with courtroom drama or chemical baggage. The bitter truth is this: Velveeta was never liquid gold for families. It was gold for the shareholders, and every slice melted into a casserole came with hidden costs paid in health, trust, and community. What was once sold as a symbol of warmth has revealed itself as a cold calculation, and the bill has landed squarely in the shopping carts of everyday Americans. Number 5. Land O'Lakes. Land O'Lakes has long positioned itself as the picture of wholesome Americana. Its butter and processed cheese once wrapped with the now retired Native American Butter Maiden. Yet beneath the nostalgia, the brand has faced troubling controversies. While cheese-specific recalls have been rare, Land O'Lakes has not been immune to safety scares, with government inspectors noting lapses in sanitary practices. For families relying on processed slices to stretch meals, even the hint of contamination feels like a betrayal, especially when health risks weigh heavily on older, more vulnerable shoppers. Beyond safety, the brand's image has been scarred by ethical and cultural issues. The decision to cling to the Butter Maiden logo for nearly a century before finally retiring it in 2020 drew widespread criticism for cultural insensitivity, with many questioning why it took so long to act. At the same time, undercover investigations exposed disturbing conditions at supplier farms. Cows mistreated, barns overcrowded, and workers enduring grueling shifts with little protection. These revelations shattered the idyllic, farmer-owned narrative, replacing it with the harsh reality of industrial dairies driven by profit over care. Environmental costs deepen the mistrust. Lawsuits and reports have linked Land O'Lakes' supply chain to manure runoff, contaminating Midwestern waterways, leaving rural families with foul drinking water. For communities that once prided themselves on clean lakes and safe wells, the hidden price of cheap cheese showed up in bottled water bills and algae blooms. Add to this the backlash against the company's political donations. Millions funneled into campaigns criticized for undermining immigrant rights, while relying on immigrant labor, and the contradictions become glaring. Land O'Lakes may still line grocery shelves, but its legacy is layered with recalls, cultural controversy, environmental damage, and hypocrisy. What was sold as a slice of Americana now looks like a case study in corporate doublespeak, leaving consumers to wonder whether the true cost of their cheese is measured not at checkout, but in trust lost along the way. Number 6. Great value. Great value, Walmart's bargain label, is supposed to ease the burden on tight budgets, but its track record makes every slice a gamble. Recalls have struck repeatedly. Shredded mozzarella flagged for listeria, cheddar pulled for salmonella, and American singles yanked over undeclared allergens. In one alarming case, inspectors caught pasteurization failures that could have turned each package into a breeding ground for bacteria. For those stretching Social Security checks, a sandwich that looks cheap at checkout can end up costing thousands in hospital bills. The problem doesn't end with contamination. Independent tests have shown Walmart's cheese to be padded with fillers like sodium phosphate and calcium sulfate, chemicals more at home in drywall than in kitchens. While Europe restricts many of these additives, Great Value continues to slip them into American lunchboxes. What's marketed as real cheese is closer to a lab project, with shoppers unknowingly cast as test subjects. The human cost extends down the supply chain. To keep prices rock bottom, Walmart squeezes suppliers so hard that labor abuses surface, long shifts without overtime pay, exposure to harsh cleaning chemicals, and whistleblowers describing frozen sweatshops. For older shoppers who once endured factory floors themselves, the echoes are unmistakable. Different product, same exploitation. Environmental damage adds another layer of betrayal. Watchdog groups have tied suppliers to manure lagoons, leaking nitrates into groundwater, leaving rural families buying bottled water while Walmart counts profits. For those who remember when you could safely drink from the tap, the loss feels personal. Great Value cheese is sold as savings, but behind the plastic wrapper lies a ledger of risks: recalls, chemicals, labor exploitation, and polluted land. The brand cheapens more than cheese. It cheapens the very people forced to buy it. Alternatives like Sargento, Organic Valley, or Belgioioso may cost more upfront, but they don't gamble with trust, health, and community. Number 7. Sargento. Sargento built its reputation on being the real cheese people, a family-owned company with smiling ads and Wisconsin roots. But recalls tied to listeria have shaken that wholesome image more than once. In 2017, millions of packages of sliced and shredded cheese were pulled after contamination risks from a supplier, and in early 2024, Sargento again found itself swept into headlines when a partner's cottage cheese sparked a massive outbreak. Even though Sargento clarified its branded products were safe, misinformation spread fast, leaving shoppers confused and tossing out perfectly good cheese. For households already living on razor-thin budgets, wasting food feels like betrayal. The danger isn't abstract. Listeria can mean meningitis, miscarriages, or death for vulnerable groups, and every recall notice lands like a thunderclap in American kitchens. What cuts deeper is that Sargento's problems came not from rare accidents, but from cracks in oversight. Dirty equipment and sloppy supplier controls open the door for bacteria, turning real cheese into a real risk. The irony is sharp. The company that markets purity allowed contamination to slip in through the back door. Beyond recalls, watchdogs have questioned Sargento's natural branding. Ultra-thin slices still carry high-sodium loads, hidden beneath cheerful marketing. For older shoppers managing heart disease or high blood pressure, one sandwich can quietly stack up medical risks. Add in reports of animal mistreatment and worker struggles in the dairy supply chain, and the family-owned label begins to look more like a marketing costume than reality. For those seeking peace of mind, alternatives exist. Brands like Cracker Barrel, Jarlsberg, or Murray's partner lines at major grocers offer cheeses with fewer headlines and cleaner reputations. The lesson is clear. Sargento may call itself real, but consumers are left questioning whether the risks are just too real to ignore. Number 8. Borden. Borden American cheese once carried the smiling face of Elsie the cow, a symbol of comfort and Americana, but the brand's history tells a darker story. In 2015, Borden recalled its 2% and fat-free American cheese slices after packaging defects left strips of plastic stuck to the cheese, creating choking hazards. No injuries were reported, but the idea of a child or senior swallowing plastic exposed just how fragile the company's quality control really was. For a legacy brand, such a basic failure shook the trust of families who had once counted on Borden for everyday meals. The issues stretch far beyond that recall. Nutrition critics point out that Borden slices are packed with sodium, artificial colors, and preservatives, turning what was marketed as wholesome into a hidden health risk. One slice alone pushes older shoppers closer to dangerous sodium limits, raising blood pressure in silence. For people already juggling pills for the heart, Borden's comfort food can quietly load the deck against them. Corporate instability also haunts the brand. Once a dairy titan, Borden collapsed under financial mismanagement, dissolving much of its empire by the early 2000s and resurfacing under cooperatives. Bankruptcy filings and executive bonuses during closures painted a picture of profits for the top and pink slips for workers. Communities that relied on Borden plants were left gutted, another reminder that nostalgia doesn't keep jobs alive. Even Elsie the cow has become a lightning rod. Critics argue the mascot was a smiling mask for a supply chain marred by animal mistreatment and worker exploitation. Investigations linked Borden's dairies to overcrowded barns, hormone use, and unsafe working conditions. For retirees who remember fighting for safer workplaces, it feels like history repeating. Exploitation wrapped in plastic packaging. Borden once stood for American tradition, but its legacy is now riddled with recalls, additives, bankruptcies, and ethical stains. For shoppers who grew up trusting Elsie, the betrayal is bitter. The cow they remembered from TV jingles now stands as a reminder that even the most nostalgic brands can sell out their values. The truth about America's cheese aisle is darker than you think. Subscribe now, stay alert, and protect your family's future.
Thanks a lot for sticking with us to the very end. If you found this video useful, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you won't miss any daily uploads. And now, go ahead and explore some of our top recommended videos popping up on your screen. Goodbye, and see you in the next one.